have written a couple of reports already about DMT as well as 5-methoxy-DMT. I feel that I now have a fuller understanding than I did before of the workings of these substances, particularly the 5-methoxy variant, which has emerged as my preference between the two. Few people seem to be ready for the 5-methoxy-DMT experience when it sweeps them off their feet for the first time. I know that I certainly wasn't. Before I could derive much value and or enjoyment from it, I had to get comfortable with the nature of the experience itself. Now I would like to offer a general overview of what the vaporized 5-methoxy-DMT experience represents in my mind. First of all, in the past, I have taken unmeasured doses of 5-methoxy-DMT, and mentioned the results in certain reports. This is just foolish. These substances should be measured out on a milligram accurate scale so that the dosage is known every time that it is taken. Experiences resulting from vaporization of any chemical will vary, based on factors such as how completely the dose is vaporized, how long the smoke is held in for, and whether any residue is left on the pipe from previous uses before a new dose is fed into the pipe chamber. Nonetheless, the consequences of overdoing the dose with 5-MD can be rather shocking, and measurement is necessary to maintaining control over the experiences that occur. The dose for 5-methoxy-DMT is 5 to 10 milligrams. 5 for a moderate experience, if a word such as moderate can even be attached to an experience such as vaporized 5-MD, and 10 for an experience that is practically overwhelming. There is no real advantage to going above 10 milligrams. It only increases the odds of side effects occurring, such as nausea or extreme panic. I keep pre-measured capsules of 5 and 10 milligrams of crystalline 5-MD ready to go. They can be dumped into a glass pipe, either through the hole in the stem or the hole in the bulb. My 5-MD is crystalline, not powder, so it does not stick to the glass when tumbling down the interior of the stem. However, pieces of crystal may occasionally stick to the interior of the plastic capsules that are used to keep doses measured out. When this happens, they can be coaxed out with a poke from a needle. Once loaded into a bulb, the crystals are melted down into a puddle with a quick application of a flame, and allowed to crystallize into a shiny puddle at the bottom of the pipe. Then the flame is reapplied closely enough to vaporize without burning. The puddle of 5-MD should give off thin wisps of steam without darkening or changing in color. The smoke is inhaled through the stem of the pipe and held in the lungs for at least a few seconds before exhaling. The experience begins within seconds of inhalation, and reaches a full peak in well under a minute's time. The peak lasts a maximum of 5 to 6 minutes, but it is normal for mild hallucinations, as well as physical and or mental stimulation to linger for up to 20 minutes after the experience itself dies down. Because of the short duration of the 5-MD experience, I, as well as the select few friends who I share it with, sometimes find myself wanting to load and take a second hit perhaps 20 to 30 minutes after the first one, and sometimes later even a third. I generally find, though, that after 3 5-MD trips in one day, the growing nausea and general physical exhaustion force me to take a break. That break is always at least a month long. The substance is not exactly addictive. The largest measured dose of 5-MD I have so far been able to smoke in a day was 25 milligrams, 10 milligrams plus 5 milligrams plus 10 milligrams. I believe the break I took after the day was for 3 months. Now as for what the experience actually is. At first I had defined it as a mixture of pleasure and existential terror. But eventually I realized there was nothing about it for which I should be terrified. I came, instead, to see it more as a process of submitting to God's essence, His light, and letting it seize me completely, letting God's life force carry me away to wherever it chooses to take me. To condense it down to a single phrase, vaporized 5-MeO-DMT is spiritually orgasmic. It is a spiritual/physical sensation of release, a journey of the body which has spiritual ramifications. What is an orgasm? It is a release of pent-up energy that can be enjoyed alone or shared with other parties. A simple, primitive release of energy, a state of animal satisfaction. 5-MeO-DMT creates an orgasmic state that emanates not from one area of the body, but from directly inside the spirit itself. A spirit orgasm. The most striking thing about the 5-MeO-DMT trip, for me, may be the mannerisms and expressions I find myself exhibiting as I'm hurtling through it. Different people have different ways of showing what it is they are feeling, but nobody appears normal while under the influence of this drug. Some friends I have given it to just sit still, an intense, knowing expression plastered across their faces, unable to move. Some of them stop speaking completely, while others mutter about how crazy the substance is. I usually feel the need to move around quite a bit. The stronger the dose, the more pronounced the need to move becomes, and the more likely that a lot of it will play out on the floor rather than with me standing on my feet. In the course of a single trip, I may clutch my head in wonder, then stand up and walk around in circles, then sit down, then fall over onto the floor and start shaking with every thread and fiber of my body, stretching my limbs out across the floor and purring like a cat. I may moan, scream, or laugh hysterically. I may kneel and put my hands together as if praying, or hold my arms outstretched with my fingers curled up as if attempting to grasp a limitless amount of energy in my hands. I may stamp my feet or run my fingers across any objects that are around me, feeling them in awe and wonder. I may do all of these things multiple times, while breaking occasionally to simply sit still, my breath heavy and heart racing, as my spirit releases energy out into the world. I often get the sensation of white light rushing towards me, as if moving quickly through the ever further stretching corridors of a long tunnel, my surroundings breaking up into wavy patterns as the energy flows. Closed eye visuals are common and sometimes quite powerful. In the end I tend to find myself exhausted, slowly catching my breath, resting, and feeling strangely fulfilled. Much like the minutes after an orgasm occurs. I never feel the urge to touch myself during the experience, no matter how sensual it may be. The pleasure comes from inside my core, not localized to any individual part of my body. The release comes by itself. Another way I could describe the nature of the 5MD experience is that, if you can imagine the brain as a computer, 5MD switches the brain completely off, then turns it back on again. I can sense my consciousness stretching out nearly to the point of total decimation, then booting itself back up. It is like an emergency reboot button for the human mind. 5MD says shoot so much energy through that brain that it shuts down. Then it will start up again fresh and life can begin from a new page. Sometimes I find that this can be a useful tool during times of distress, when my difficulties become so great that I feel like I need a break from reality. One little puff of smoke and it's like the whole year starts over again from scratch. Who wouldn't want a reset button for their brain? But I know I have to be careful how often I flip that switch. It is always possible to overload the brain with too much energy. And when the processors in a person's brain start showing blue screen errors, it isn't possible to just drive to the store and pick up a replacement.